After paying $44,000 for my sister's wedding, I thought I had done my part as the generous older sibling. I covered the flowers, the venue, the food, even her designer dress, all because she insisted she wanted the perfect fairy tale in Italy, something she could brag about for the rest of her life. I didn't even hesitate when she said she couldn't afford it herself, because family comes first, right? At least, that's what I kept telling myself every time I swiped my card and watched my savings disappear. But nothing could have prepared me for what she did next. On the day I flew out to Italy, bags packed, tickets in hand, ready to be the maid of honor at the wedding I had practically bought, she texted me the address of the city I was supposed to head to. It looked fancy, picturesque, the kind of place you'd see on a postcard. I trusted her completely. So I boarded the train, dragging my luggage through cobblestone streets, sweating under the Italian sun, only to realize hours later that she had sent me to the wrong city. Not just a little mistake, not just a typo. She had deliberately picked a city hundreds of miles away, laughed about it, and called it a prank. And while she was sipping champagne at her dream wedding, I was stranded, alone, watching the night creep in over a place where I didn't belong. That was the moment something inside me broke. I stood there in that strange Italian city, with my phone buzzing in my hand, her messages lighting up the screen. "Relax, it's just a joke," she wrote, followed by laughing emojis. I reread the words over and over, my stomach twisting tighter each time. A joke. That's what $44,000, months of planning, sleepless nights arranging vendors and payments had been reduced to in her mind. A chance to humiliate me, to get one last laugh before walking down the aisle in the dress I paid for. I dragged my suitcase across uneven stones, tourists brushing past me, their conversations a blur of languages I couldn't understand. I tried to breathe, tried to tell myself maybe it wasn't intentional, but then I remembered her smirk when I had handed over the deposit slips, the way she had bragged to her friends about having me wrapped around her finger. But the weight of it all hit me at once. My generosity had been her weapon. I had been set up, not just to lose money, but to lose dignity. And somewhere, beneath the sting of betrayal, another feeling began to stir. A cold, sharp clarity that told me this wasn't going to end the way she thought. I found a bench near the train station and sank onto it, sweat sticking my dress to my back, the evening air heavy with exhaust and the bitter scent of burnt espresso. My phone kept buzzing, her friends posting photos on social media, all smiles, and champagne glasses raised high, the Tuscan hills glowing behind them. Every heart emoji felt like a nail being hammered into me. I zoomed in on the pictures and spotted the necklace I had bought her as a bridal gift, glittering on her collarbone as if it had always been hers, as if my sacrifices existed only to decorate her. The pit in my stomach turned to fire. This wasn't a careless oversight. She had made a deliberate choice. To isolate me, to mock me, to remind me that no matter how much I gave, I would never be respected. I opened my bank app, my heart pounding, as I scrolled through the transactions. $5,000 here for flowers, $12,000 for catering, $8,000 for the venue. It read like an obituary of my trust. I screenshotted every receipt, every transfer, every confirmation email. My hands shook, but not from fear. It was focus, pure and cutting. I realized I wasn't just her sister anymore. I had been turned into her benefactor, her financier, her fool, and she thought she could write me out of the story entirely. But she forgot something. I had the paper trail. I had proof that her fairy tale was built on my blood and sweat. So while she toasted with her guests, I opened my laptop in that crowded station and began typing out emails to the venue, to the vendors, to the luxury boutique where her dress was still on partial credit. I explained the situation, attached the documents, CC'd her name and address, made sure no detail could be twisted. By the time I was done, the wedding she flaunted online was already collapsing behind the scenes. She thought she'd humiliated me. She thought the joke was on me. But I had just started writing my own punchline, and hers was going to sting a lot longer than a train ride gone wrong. The first call came just as the sky turned black above the station, the lamps flickering to life one by one. It was the catering company, their manager's voice clipped and furious, demanding to know why the account tied to my name had been flagged for dispute. I leaned back against the cold metal bench, listening to the chaos spill through the line. The food already served, invoices unpaid, Whispers among the staff about calling the police. I could almost picture it. The long banquet tables groaning with food. The laughter dimming as whispers rippled across the room. My sister's perfect illusion unraveling in real time. She had stolen my dignity. Now I was quietly pulling away her mask. Then came another email, this time from the bridal boutique, curt and formal. As the balance remains unsettled, we will be dispatching a representative to the venue tomorrow to reclaim our property. I stared at the words until they blurred, imagining the look on her face when someone marched into her honeymoon brunch and asked for her designer gown back. My hands trembled. Not with guilt, but with something like release. For years, I had carried her weight. The lies, the manipulation, the endless demands disguised as family duty. I thought back to every Christmas when she'd insisted on gifts beyond my means, every birthday where her happiness had eclipsed mine, every cruel comment masked as a joke. She had treated me like a tool, a background character in the spectacle of her life. But now the spotlight was shifting. Sitting there in a foreign city, abandoned, I realized I wasn't powerless. I was the one holding the receipts, the contracts, the truth. And truth, once unleashed, doesn't politely knock. It breaks down doors. I closed my laptop and let the sounds of the city wash over me, the trains pulling out, couples arguing, street musicians plucking sad strings. For the first time in years, I felt steady. This wasn't revenge born out of rage. It was balance, overdue and undeniable. She had laughed at me for being stranded, but soon the only one stranded would be her. Stranded in the wreckage of the fairy tale I had funded and then dismantled piece by piece. By morning, my phone was a battlefield of unanswered calls and furious voicemails. Her voice, shrill and cracking, burst through one after another. "What did you do?" Followed by muffled shouting in the background, clinking glasses abandoned, the chaos of a party gone wrong. I lay in the small hotel bed I'd booked near the station, curtains half drawn against the pale Italian sunlight, and let each message play like music. The venue manager demanding payment. The florist threatening to repossess arrangements mid-celebration. The boutique confirming they had dispatched their representative. My sister's perfect dream had turned into a living debt collection scene, all within hours. I thought of her standing there, makeup immaculate, guests staring as the cracks began to show. Did she still think it was a joke then? I doubted it. Because the thing about jokes is they only land if both sides laugh. And I wasn't laughing anymore. I scrolled through social media again, through the glossy photos she'd posted before the storm broke. Couldn't have done it without my amazing sister, she had written in one caption, tagging me like it was a badge of honor. The irony made me snort. She wanted the credit of my generosity without the respect of it. But screenshots are permanent, and I saved every post before she had the chance to delete them. Evidence lined up neatly beside receipts, invoices, and contracts. Evidence that proved I wasn't just bitter or jealous. I was methodical, careful, prepared. Around noon, a new email arrived, this one colder than the rest. The boutique had confirmed that they spoke with authorities about possible fraud. The account was under review. My sister's name was listed beside mine in the documents, linked forever to the very schemes she thought she'd gotten away with. I lay back against the thin pillow and closed my eyes, imagining the panic crawling across her face when she realized the walls weren't just closing in, they had already closed, and she was trapped. For once, I wasn't the one stranded or humiliated. I was the one pulling invisible strings, reminding her with every snap of a thread that the wedding she thought made her untouchable was built on the back of my sacrifice, and I was done being her foundation. The prank had been her final betrayal, but this unfolding disaster was my answer. And it was only just beginning. The second day felt like watching an empire collapse from afar. I didn't even need to be present to know the chaos was spreading. My cousin messaged me first, her tone laced with disbelief. "Your sister's wedding was a nightmare. People are leaving early. Vendors are yelling in the lobby. What happened?" I didn't answer. I wanted them all to stew in confusion, to realize that beneath the glitter and glamour was nothing but rot. Later that afternoon, another voicemail arrived. This one from my mother, her voice tight with anger. She didn't ask if I was safe, didn't wonder why I hadn't shown up. Instead, she accused, "How could you embarrass the family like this? She's your sister. You ruined the most important day of her life." I let the words roll off me. For years, I had been the scapegoat, the one told to keep quiet, to swallow my pride for the sake of family. But families who use you as a wallet and a punching bag aren't families. They're leeches. And I had finally cut them off from their host. As evening fell, I walked the narrow streets of Florence, watching tourists take photos of the Duomo, bathed in golden light. The beauty around me felt like a strange counterpoint to the ugliness unraveling elsewhere. My sister might have thought she had stranded me in the wrong city, but in reality, I was exactly where I needed to be. Free, detached, and no longer bound to her manipulations. I stopped at a small cafe and ordered a glass of wine, savoring the tartness on my tongue as I opened her newest message. She was begging now, her words frantic, peppered with apologies that felt rehearsed. Please fix this. Please call them back. I'll make it up to you. I almost laughed out loud. She had never apologized before, not once in our entire lives. And now the only reason she choked out the words was because her reputation was in shambles, her dream wedding reduced to a cautionary tale. I closed my phone and let the screen go dark. The truth was, there was nothing left to fix. The contracts were already in motion, the disputes filed, the vendors united against her. It was no longer in my hands. It was in theirs. In the cold. Machinery of business and law that didn't bend for crocodile tears. For the first time in decades, I felt light. The prank she thought would humiliate me had detonated in her face, and I hadn't even raised my voice. I didn't need to. Silence was louder than anything I could have said. By the third day, silence became its own kind of weapon. I had stopped answering everyone, leaving their calls to pile up like unread junk mail. My mother, my aunts, even distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly discovered my number, each message angrier or more desperate than the last. One uncle said I had dishonored the family name, as though my sister hadn't been the one to orchestrate cruelty and deceit. Another relative begged me to reconsider, warning me that lawyers might get involved. I let them talk into the void while I wandered through piazzas, drinking cappuccinos at small tables where no one knew me, and no one expected anything from me. The sun was warm, the air smelled of bread and basil, and for the first time in years, I could simply exist, without owing anyone a piece of myself. Meanwhile, the news of what happened spread faster than I could have imagined. Friends of friends sent screenshots of local Italian chatter. Guests at the wedding had posted about the scene, the shouting, the abrupt departures. The images were almost surreal. My sister in her dress, face stiff with fury, as men in suits confronted her about payment. Guests huddled in corners whispering, tables of half-eaten food left abandoned. What was supposed to be her fairy tale had turned into a circus, and she was the unwilling clown at the center. I scrolled through it all with a strange mix of detachment and vindication. She had wanted me humiliated in a foreign city, stripped of dignity. Instead, she was the spectacle, the story whispered behind closed doors, her name forever tied to a disaster that couldn't be erased from memory. Vendors were threatening legal action. The boutique had already reclaimed her gown the day after the ceremony, leaving her standing in a borrowed outfit for what should have been her honeymoon. And me? I was in Florence, sipping wine, collecting every shred of evidence like a historian documenting the fall of a dynasty. Because that's what it was. The fall of her little empire built on manipulation, financed by my sacrifices. She thought she had written me out of the story, but she had underestimated me. The joke she crafted so carefully had flipped. And now she was the punchline. And the best part? I didn't have to lift another finger. The damage was self-sustaining, unraveling all on its own. By the end of that week, her voice had changed from rage to desperation. The voicemails were no longer sharp knives thrown at me. They were trembling whispers, shaky breaths between words. Please, just talk to me. You don't understand. They're threatening to sue. I can't pay this back. I don't know what to do. For a moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I remembered the smirk on her face when she sent me those wrong directions, the way she thought my humiliation would be the highlight of her day. And the pity vanished like smoke. Actions have weight, and hers had finally come crashing down on her shoulders instead of mine. I spent those days documenting everything with meticulous care. Every voicemail transcribed, every screenshot backed up, every receipt filed neatly, in folders. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about making sure the truth had a record, one that couldn't be twisted into some sob story where I was the villain. And while she flailed, I thrived. I toured cathedrals, wandered markets filled with fresh bread and flowers, let strangers guide me through alleys to hidden cafes. I had never felt lighter, freer, more in control. Meanwhile, family gossip painted a darker picture back home. The wedding vendors had already filed formal complaints. Creditors were calling her new husband non-stop. Their honeymoon had been cut short because hotels demanded payment up front once her reputation spread. The perfect Italian fantasy she had. Chaste had collapsed into debt, shame, and fractured relationships. I imagined her scrolling through social media, deleting post after post, trying to erase evidence of the chaos. But she couldn't erase the memories of those who were there. People don't forget humiliation that public. And they certainly don't forget betrayal when it's exposed so clearly. She thought she had played the perfect prank, a lifelong story she could brag about. Instead, the story being told now was mine, a sister who gave everything, who was mocked for her kindness, and who finally stopped being the victim. And as I stood on the Ponte Vecchio one night, the river glittering beneath me, I realized something even deeper. She had sent me to the wrong city. Yes. But in doing so, she had accidentally sent me exactly where I needed to be. Far from her. Games far from her poison. Alone. Yes. But finally, blissfully free. By the time I flew back home, the storm she had created was still raging, but I was no longer in its path. I stepped through my front door with a suitcase full of receipts, screenshots, and a calmness I had never known before. My sister, meanwhile, was drowning. The boutique had filed an official fraud complaint, the venue had taken her to small claims court, and the catering company had blacklisted her name in the entire region. Her new husband, who had once smiled smugly from behind champagne glasses, was now frantically trying to negotiate payment plans. But he had no idea how deep the hole really went. They had leveraged their future on my silence, assuming I would swallow the humiliation as I always had. But this time, silence was not surrender. It was strategy. My mother tried one last time to pull me back in. She showed up at my apartment, unannounced, face drawn and tired, spitting words like venom. "Do you feel good about this? Do you feel proud that you destroyed your sister's life?" I looked her in the eye and for once didn't flinch. "I didn't destroy her life," I said quietly. "She did. I just stopped funding it." And in that moment, I knew she heard the finality in my voice. There would be no more begging, no more guilt-tripping, no more playing the dutiful daughter or sister. I had shut the door, and this time it wasn't opening again. Outside of family drama, something remarkable began to happen. People who had been silent witnesses to her cruelty, old friends, distant relatives, even colleagues, started reaching out to me privately. They told me they had always admired my patience, my generosity, my endurance, but now they respected me. They saw the strength it took to finally step away. For the first time, I wasn't just the giver, the background character in my sister's story. I was the author of my own, and with each message, each small note of support, I felt the chains of guilt fall away one by one. She was left scrambling, clutching at the ruins of her reputation, while I finally stood tall, untethered. The prank she thought would be her greatest laugh had instead written her downfall. And me? I was just getting started on a life she would never touch again. The final unraveling came quietly, not with some grand confrontation, but with silence that stretched so long it became its own kind of justice. Months passed, and the family stopped calling, their outrage burning out once they realized I would never budge. My sister's marriage, already strained under the weight of lawsuits and unpaid bills, began to crumble. Friends distanced themselves, vendors spread warnings about her name, and the fairy tale she had dreamed of became the cautionary tale everyone whispered about. She had wanted a story to boast about for the rest of her life, but not like this. Not one where she was the villain, where every detail of her selfishness was documented and undeniable. Meanwhile, my life took on a different rhythm. I kept working, kept saving, but this time for myself. I traveled when I wanted to, stayed in hotels that I paid for with no one's strings attached. I found joy in small things. Quiet mornings, with coffee, evenings with friends who valued me, weekends where I didn't have to answer anyone's demands. I even started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I finally wanted to understand why I had spent so long giving until I was empty. And in those sessions, I came to a truth that settled deep in my bones. Generosity without boundaries isn't love, it's self-erasure. And I was done erasing myself. One afternoon, while sorting old files, I stumbled across the first email I had sent to the boutique, the one that had started her collapse. I read it over slowly, remembering how my hands had shaken as I typed it in that crowded Italian station. Back then, I thought I was acting out of fury. Now I saw it differently. That email wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. It was me taking back every piece of myself I had handed over so freely, finally saying no without apology. I closed my laptop and looked around my apartment, sunlight spilling across the floor, the quiet hum of peace filling the room. For the first time, I realized the prank hadn't stranded me at all. It had liberated me. She had sent me to the wrong city, but it turned out to be the right place. Because it was there, lost among strangers and cobblestones, that I finally found myself again. And that is the story I will carry, not of a sister who mocked my kindness, but of a woman who stopped letting her.